through the use of the money so contributed. Additionally, one can make the case that the concern about corporate influence extends as far back as our founding fathers. In 1816, Thomas Jefferson wrote, quote, "I hope we shall crush in its birth the aristocracy of our moneyed corporations, which dare already to challenge our government in a trial of strength and bid defiance to the laws of our country." Kentucky was the first state to ban corporations from spending their funds in state elections in 1891. And by 1897, Florida, Missouri, Nebraska, and Tennessee had all enacted similar corporate spending prohibitions in their state elections. While some states began enacting limits on the influence of money on politics during the Civil War era, Congress did not begin to pass major campaign finance regulations until some decades later. By that time, political contributions by major corporate interests and business leaders dominated campaign fundraising, and this development sparked the first major movement for national reform. Progressive reformers such as President Theodore Roosevelt and investigative journalists charged that these business interests were attempting to gain special access and favors, thereby corrupting the democratic process. This reform movement, combined with allegations of financial impropriety in the 1904 presidential election, resulted in the enactment of significant reforms. On October 1, 1904, Joseph Pulitzer published an editorial in the New York World questioning President Roosevelt's ties to many of the large corporations that had donated to his campaign. Those questions led Roosevelt's opponent, Judge Alton Parker, to describe the donations as blackmail and insinuated that there was a quid pro quo involved. President Roosevelt responded angrily, calling the accusations monstrous, and said, quote, "The assertion that there has been any blackmail, direct or indirect, is a falsehood. The assertion that there has been made any pledge or promise or that there has been any understanding as to future immunities or benefits in recognition from any source is a wicked falsehood." President Roosevelt, not wanting to give the appearance of improper influence, directed his staff to return a $100,000 contribution from the Standard Oil Corporation. In his memo, he wrote, quote, "We cannot under any circumstances afford to take a contribution which can be even improperly construed as putting us under an improper obligation." The allegations of impropriety also led Roosevelt to call for an end to corporate donations to campaigns. In his fifth annual message to the Congress on December 5, 1905, Roosevelt said, "The power of the government to protect the integrity of the elections of its own officials is inherent and has been recognized and affirmed by repeated declarations of the Supreme Court. There is no enemy of free government more dangerous and none so insidious as the corruption of the electorate." He warned, "If legislators are extorted by any kind of pressure or promise, express or implied, direct or indirect, in the way of favor or immunity, then the giving or receiving becomes not only improper but criminal. All contributions by corporations to any political committee or for any political purpose should be forbidden by law. Directors should not be permitted to use stockholders' money for such purposes, and moreover, a prohibition of this kind would be, as far as it went, an effective method of stopping the evils aimed at in the Corrupt Practices Act. Not only should both the national and the several state legislators forbid any officer of a corporation from using the money of the corporation in or about any election, but they should also forbid such use of money in connection with any legislation." And again, the following year, in his sixth annual message to Congress in December 1906, President Roosevelt tried to limit corporate influence, stating, "I again recommend a law prohibiting all corporations from contributing to the campaign expenses of any party. Such a bill has already passed one house of Congress. Let individuals contribute as they desire, I repeat what he said, let individuals contribute as they desire, but let us prohibit in effective fashion all corporations from making contributions for any political purpose, directly or indirectly. In January 1907, Theodore Roosevelt signed into law the Tillman Act. This law prohibited nationally chartered banks and corporations from contributing to campaigns. In the report to accompany the Senate version of the legislation, dated April 27, 1906, the Senate Committee on Privileges and Elections wrote, and I quote, "The evils of the use of money in connection with political elections are so generally recognized that the committee deems it unnecessary to make any argument in favor of the general purpose of this measure. It is in the interest of good government and calculated to promote purity in the selection of public officials." Following passage of the Tillman Act, Roosevelt again addressed the issue in his 7th annual message to Congress in December 1907. He said, "Under our form of government, voting is not merely a right but a duty, and moreover a fundamental and necessary duty if a man is to be a good citizen. It is well to provide that corporations shall not contribute to presidential or national campaigns, and furthermore, to provide for the publication of both contributions and expenditures." Although the Tillman Act constituted a landmark in federal law, according to campaign finance expert Anthony Corrado, quote, "Its adoption did not quell the cries for reform. Eliminating corporate influence was only one of the ideas being advanced at this time to clean up political finance. In the years following the passage of the Tillman Act, reducing the influence of wealthy individuals and labor unions became a concern, and reformers pushed for further limits on donations. Consequently, in 1947, Congress enacted the Taft-Hartley Act, which explicitly banned corporate and labor union expenditures in federal campaigns. In doing so, Senator Robert Taft made clear that the purpose of the new language was simply to affirm what had been understood as always to be the case, that the 1907 corporate ban had prohibited corporate expenditures or indirect contributions as well as direct corporate contributions. Ban on corporate expenditures in campaigns has been consistently upheld by the Supreme Court as constitutional and as, quote, firmly embedded in our law. The constitutionality of the ban on corporate campaign expenditures was upheld by the Supreme Court in the Austin v. Michigan Chamber of Commerce decision in 1990, reaffirmed by the court in the McConnell v. Federal Election Commission decision in 2003, and the corporate expenditure ban had been commented on favorably by the court in earlier cases. In 1990, in the Austin case, the Supreme Court acknowledged the importance of maintaining the integrity of the political process. From the court's opinion, they said, quote, "Michigan identified as a serious danger the significant possibility that corporate political expenditures will undermine the integrity of the political process, and it has implemented a narrowly tailored solution to that problem. By requiring corporations to make all independent political expenditures through a separate fund made up of money solicited expressly for political purposes. The Michigan Campaign Finance Act reduces the threat that huge corporate treasuries amassed with the aid of favorable state laws will be used to influence unfairly the outcome of elections. In the McConnell case,